Has an alien satellite planted by the Annunaki been acting as an all-seeing eye since before the Great Flood? According to many theorists, yes, and they refer to it as the Black Knight satellite. Although Nikola Tesla's inventions changed the way people live today, back in 1899, his peers viewed him as an eccentric and somewhat of a mad scientist, especially when he built a laboratory and a 210-foot tower in Colorado Springs in order to experiment with electricity and record electromagnetic disturbances. His colleagues did not take him seriously, but it wasn't long after he fired it up that he reported he had received signals from extraterrestrials. The newspapers of the day mocked him. But despite the ridicule of his peers, Tesla was excited about the signals he had received, and he came to fervently believe that he had been the first to hear the greeting of one planet to another. At the time, not knowing any better, he believed those electrical signals were from Mars, but researchers now believe that the signals Tesla received actually came from the Black Knight satellite. After Tesla's discovery of the mysterious signals, they would go undetected until the 1930s, when a few astronomers had received them. But it wasn't until 1954 when the St. Louis Dispatch ran an article titled, "Artificial Satellites Are Circling Earth." Writer on Saucers wrote about unidentified satellites orbiting Earth. He claimed the government knew about them and was trying to discover their source. The referenced writer was Donald E. Kehoe. Kehoe later wrote Aliens in Space, the real story of unidentified flying objects, where he documented his knowledge of UFOs, including what he knew about the Black Knight satellite. It's believed that in 1953, a professor at the University of New Mexico saw a blip of unknown origin. In 1957, Luis Carolus, with the Communications Ministry in Venezuela, was taking pictures of the Russian satellite Sputnik 2 as it passed over Caracas. The Black Knight showed up in his photographs. This was the first known actual picture of the object. In 1960, an American satellite showed the object following Sputnik 1, which was still orbiting Earth. The satellite was in polar orbit, and neither the US nor Russia at the time had the technology to achieve this feat. The object also appeared to be much larger and heavier than anything either country could launch. Then in the 1960s, Time magazine, as well as other news publications, reported on the Black Knight and referred to it as possibly having an extraterrestrial origin. Of course, shortly after, the US government printed an article stating that they saw debris from the Discoverer satellite they had recently launched. Then just 3 years later, NASA astronaut Gordon Cooper claimed to have seen a UFO while in orbit. This claim was also backed by at least 100 employees from a NASA space station in Australia at the time. And though NASA refuted what he saw, Gordo stood by his claim until the day he died in 2004. For the next 10 years, the Black Knight satellite would continue its polar orbit unhindered. That was until 1973, when a Scottish astronomy and science fiction author, Duncan Lunan, wrote that he had identified and deciphered a hidden radio message in outer space radio emissions that predate human existence in outer space. Lunar claimed the message deciphered as follows: "Start here. Our home is in the Epsilon Boötis, which is a double star. We live on the sixth planet of 7, coming from the sun, which is the larger of the two. Our sixth planet has 1 moon. Our fourth planet has 3. Our first and third planets each have 1. Our probe is in the position of Arcturus, known in our maps." And I don't know about you guys, but I've caught myself staring at this constellation in particular often and wondered what the origins were. I just always remember thinking of it as a slightly crooked kite. Very unique, and it stands out quite obviously. And what's more fascinating about this, in the ancient Sumerian tablets that tell the book of Enki and Enlil, who were Mesopotamian gods often referenced as Akhenaten or Ramses II, and believed to be of Annunaki royalty, were also brothers and were said to be the creators of humanity. But according to these tablets, when Enlil left humanity to Earth, he left an all-seeing eye. This was so he could monitor mankind and watch over us, and watch the planet as we develop and grow. So according to theorist Billy Carson, this is the Black Knight satellite. It's actually an Annunaki all-seeing eye. A satellite so advanced, It has a polar orbit and it can read anything, anytime, from population dispersion to the depth of the ocean to seismic activity and weather. And what's even more fascinating about these tablets is they say that Enlil actually owns the constellation Epsilon Boötis, and that he resides on one of those planets within that constellation watching over us to this day. Pretty interesting how well it matches up with Lunan's original deciphering of the code Black Knight satellite originally sent to him back in 1973. Now what's more fascinating yet is the fact that it sends its signals in binary code. They know this because the government has figured out a way to communicate with the satellite. Nobody really knows the nature of their communication, but it is proven that yes, they have figured out how to communicate with this satellite. And just wrap your head around that for a second. Binary code from a satellite that's supposedly 13,000 years old, that's mind-blowing. Some even say this thing could be older. It could be in the hundreds of thousands of years old. Going even further, some believe it could even be an earlier, more advanced human civilization that placed it into orbit. So you're probably asking, why haven't we shot it down? Why haven't we tried to board it? Or why haven't we tried to actually capture the satellite? Well, that's because the government's afraid of any defense mechanisms it has in place or types of weaponry that could emit from it if, say, they do try to board it. For all they know, they could shoot it down and it could spread a contagion or totally annihilate society. Do we try and actually do something with it? Then there's the obvious one that if you shoot it down, are you going to alert the aliens that put it into orbit? Are you going to anger them? Are they going to attack if you take out their satellite? Or are you going to alert some species from way out into the cosmos? There's a lot that goes on with actually taking out the satellite or capturing it. That's why the government is avoiding it at all costs. And I have a theory that what if the government has figured out how to tap into the satellite and use its imagery? Now, it wasn't long ago that the CIA gave Google Earth to Google. Could they be using this satellite as their Google Earth satellite if they had tapped into it? Because I don't know how many satellites can actually see to the depths of the oceans, can actually see what's at the bottom of the oceans. I'm not sure we have technology advanced enough to do that, but this just may. Just a theory. Nevertheless, the Black Knight satellite has baffled scientists and the scientific community for the last century. Who knows, maybe someday the government will let out what it exactly is, because I believe they know. But until then, we can only speculate. What do you think it is? Do you think it's a earlier civilization of humankind? Extraterrestrial? Annunaki? Let me know in the comments. Y'all have been asking me to do a video on this for quite a while, so there it is. Stay in the love, stay in the light, be kind to others, and stay tuned. I am out.